If you have salespeople and they're not complaining that their prospects simply don't pick up the phone, there are two reasons why. It might be that you sell into construction projects, or that you call on buyers who are compelled to take your salespeople's calls. Or it might be that your salespeople are so busy with account management they never get time to pick up the phone, meaning neither they nor you are aware of how incredibly difficult it is to start a conversation with a potential customer in this day and age. I'm Justin Roff-Marsh, founder of Ballistix and author of The Machine. This presentation is pretty information dense, so I'm going to keep it tight. If you have a question, I'd love to answer it. Just post it in the comments section and I'll get to it at the end. The cold hard reality is that new technologies made it easy for prospects to avoid talking to salespeople. They're no longer dependent upon salespeople for information discovery, and they have the means to reject inbound calls by default. You probably do it yourself. Now, there are two approaches to mitigating this problem. There's the brute force approach, where you free salespeople of all distractions so they can spend 8 hours a day on outbound calls, which means picking up the phone 80 to 100 times a day. And then there's the elegant solution, which marketing folks have fallen in love with, where you spend marketing dollars to generate inbound inquiries, which presumably results in easier conversations for salespeople. But there's one problem with both of these approaches, and that's diminishing returns. You can scale the brute force approach by adding more salespeople. But because this is painful, thankless work, the quality of your sales force degrades over time. And the problem with inbound marketing is that increasing your marketing spend doesn't result in a commensurate increase in inbound inquiries. Another big problem with inbound is that most inquiries tend to be transactional in nature, meaning they should probably be routed direct to your customer service team and not to the sales department. To summarize, when your salespeople call prospective customers, virtually no one picks up the phone. You can compensate by creating a boiler room environment, but you'll burn through salespeople. And most organizations don't want to operate a boiler room. Or you can buy into the inbound religion, but that means satisfying yourself with a very small number of inbound inquiries of dubious quality. If we're going to solve this problem, we need to dig a little deeper. Now, you might remember from high school economics classes that markets tend, over time, towards efficiency. In an efficient market, information is evenly distributed, meaning that buyers can make decisions quickly and objectively. Consequently, in a perfectly efficient market, there are no salespeople. But fortunately, no market is perfectly efficient. The primary reason is innovation. Innovation results in the release of new information into the marketplace, and it takes time for this new information to diffuse. If it's a major information, such as the creation of Uber, or more recently ChatGPT, then the information diffusion occurs organically and quickly. If it's a smaller innovation, then marketing and sales departments are required to speed the diffusion process. The lesson is that salesmanship is dependent upon innovation, although parenthetically, innovation is not necessarily reliant on salesmanship. In more practical terms, this means that the effectiveness of both marketing and sales depends on innovation. In the absence of innovation, your return on marketing spend will go to zero, and no one will answer your salespeople's calls. To achieve a breakthrough, we need to examine the connection between salesmanship and innovation. Are each of these independent requirements, or do they exist in service of a common goal? Obviously, both innovation and salesmanship are required to drive an organization's growth. This diagram visualizes the relationship between these concepts. Innovation is the antecedent to growth, and salesmanship, including marketing, is an accelerant. Since our sales problem appears to be intractable, it makes sense to broaden our perspective and determine what we need to do to maximize growth. I think it's fair to say that most business owners are interested in innovation and sales only to the extent that these are required to drive growth. So our big idea is to shift our focus from maximizing sales to maximizing growth. Given this new focus, let's explore the component parts of the growth formula. Growth is a result of the addition of accounts, new customers in other words, and the addition of new categories of business for existing accounts. Salesmanship takes the form of marketing, virtual salesmanship if you like, and traditional sales activity. And innovation takes the form of new products, new territories, and new acquisitions. Now, where new products are concerned, innovation might take the form of brand new products or services, or it could involve the repackaging of existing products and services, or it might take the form of a material improvement to an existing product as a result of production or supply chain innovation. There's no shortage of opportunities for innovation. It's important we recognize that the component parts of our growth formula are tightly integrated. This means that incremental improvements in one place are likely to be multiplied. New products and product improvements make it easier to win new accounts and sell new categories of business to existing accounts. Likewise, new territories provide opportunities to win new accounts and to expand existing ones. Acquisitions bring new products and new territories, as well as new accounts. And the existence of a functioning growth engine, like the one pictured, makes your organization more attractive to potential acquisitions. Take note of those two words, growth engine. We're no longer trying to improve sales or to innovate in a vacuum. Our objective is to build a tightly integrated growth engine. So that's the theory. Let's transition now to execution. How exactly do you go about building this growth engine? I challenge you to do this simple test. Grab one of your salespeople and ask them why their role exists. Odds are they'll tell you it's their job to drive revenue. You can't fault your salesperson for this answer. Most likely you created this expectation when you hired them. And in the modern organization, there's a good chance the sales department is accountable to a chief revenue officer, which kind of makes this expectation explicit. So here's the problem. The pursuit of revenue is not the same as the pursuit of growth. In fact, the relentless pursuit of revenue will result in an absence of growth. Here's why. In a typical business, almost all revenue comes from existing customers repurchasing. The relentless pursuit of revenue turns salespeople into highly paid account managers, which is a polite way of saying customer service reps. Revenue is not the source of growth, it's the result of growth. The root cause of growth is innovation, as we've discussed. If you want to grow, you need to stop chasing revenue and start chasing sources of revenue. Now, this distinction is not just semantics. It determines the definition of success within critical departments. It determines the structure of the overall organization, and ultimately, it determines whether your organization will grow or wither on the vine. Let's start with the structure of your organization. The goal of a business is to generate enterprise value. Enterprise value is a function of operating profit and a growth premium. This means that a fast-growing business is more valuable than a slow-growing one, given the same level of operating profit. As the operator of a business, you're responsible for maintaining a sensible trade-off between operating profit and growth. If you maximize operating profit, your business doesn't grow and quickly becomes irrelevant. And if you maximize growth, you fail to generate a commercial return on shareholders' investment. So here's what happens in a typical organization. You start with an understanding of the importance of growth and all its constituent parts. And then you add the requirement to generate operating profit. Given your organization has finite capacity, and given that the people who are expected to make a contribution to growth and operating profit are the same people, you inevitably end up with the pursuit of operating profit consuming all the organization's capacity, meaning that the effort expended in pursuit of growth goes to zero. Here are two common examples. A salesperson who's expected to look after existing accounts and win new ones ends up spending all their available time on the former. Or an engineer who's expected to work on custom solutions for existing customers, as well as the development of new products, ends up allocating virtually none of their creative energy to new product innovation. The bottom line is that the activities required for growth and those necessary for revenue generation are antagonistic. If you attempt to perform both sets of activities within the same environment, the effort expended on one set will go to zero, and we all know which set that is. There's only one practical way to avoid this, and that's to split your organization into two discrete groups. There's the business as usual group that focuses on generating operating profit, which primarily consists of the pursuit of revenue. And then there's the growth group that focuses on growth. The business as usual, or the BAU group, is responsible for converting potential revenue into actual revenue. And the growth group is responsible for growing the basket of potential revenue that powers the BAU group. That basket of potential revenue takes the form of accounts and goodwill. Practically, we already understand the growth formula. It's new products, new territories, new acquisitions, together with the catalytic effect of marketing and sales. The profit formula is the simple value chain that stretches from an inbound inquiry all the way through fulfillment. Before we proceed, I need to stress that the essential characteristic of this model is the discrete nature of these two groups. I'm not describing two departments within a larger organization. I'm describing two autonomous groups. These groups must have their own leaders. My preference is that your Chief Operations Officer assumes responsibility for the BAU group, and that a Chief Growth Officer leads the growth group. These groups must have their own resource pools with virtually no shared team members. If there are some team members that must be shared, then these individuals must have a ton of protective capacity and their time must be formally scheduled. These groups have different economics, which means they must be accountable to different metrics. Where the BAU group seeks to maximize operating profit, the growth group seeks to maximize return on investment. The CEO remains aware that these two groups are pursuing their own local optima and is solely responsible for maintaining the optimal balance between growth and operating profit. Interestingly, this model is not new. You can observe it operating exactly as described in technology startups and in quick service restaurant chains. And you can probably think of other examples too. My message is that if you want to maintain consistent growth as your organization scales, then you need to redesign your organization so it consists of two discrete groups: business as usual to generate operating profit, and growth to generate its namesake. Let's complete our discussion by returning to where we began, your sales team. We discovered that what appears to be a rather trivial problem, prospects declining to take salespeople's calls, was actually the result of a more significant issue, the absence of compelling propositions. And this, in turn, is a consequence of a less than optimal organizational design. So let's assume you fix the design problem by creating a dedicated growth group. What are the implications for salespeople? One thing doesn't change. It's still very difficult for salespeople to get potential customers to pick up their phones. But now you have fewer salespeople. They spend a greater percentage of their time selling new categories of product to existing customers, and those are much easier conversations. And to the extent that they do pick up the phone and attempt to initiate conversations with strangers, they're now leading with much more compelling propositions. You're no longer allocating total responsibility for growth to your sales department and hoping they manage to pull a rabbit out of a hat. You now have a deliberate, concerted, and properly resourced growth engine. But structural changes are required. You need to expand the scope of your operations group to include account management and customer service. And you will need to restructure your sales department. In the new model, you need a small team of highly skilled and well-paid internal salespeople. This team should work inside exclusively, and they should be paid salaries, not commissions. This team should be deployed as an accelerant for all of your growth initiatives, whether that's selling new categories to existing accounts, winning new accounts in a new territory, or even assisting in the pursuit of acquisitions. Most members of your legacy sales team are unlikely to be excited about this new role, and that's okay. You should reallocate these folks to roles that are a good fit for their current modus operandi. Some can become strategic account managers within your operations group. Others might join your engineering team as subject matter experts. Some might become field specialists, visiting client sites, performing discrete tasks in support of either the growth or the BAU team. Now, this is, of course, a significant undertaking. There's risk involved. But of course, treading water can be a risky strategy too, especially in shark-infested waters. So let me finish with a question. Your salespeople, those folks who struggle to get prospects to pick up the phone, why did you hire them? Was it because you wanted highly paid customer service reps? Or was it because you wanted your organization to grow? Now, if these ideas have got you thinking, I have an offer for you. It's free, so you can put your checkbook away. I'm offering to run a 90-minute workshop for you and your leadership team. The objective will be to figure out how to structure your organization for growth without inflating operating expenses. No fluff, no sales pitch, just me and your leadership team rolling up our sleeves and trying to solve this difficult growth puzzle. If you like that idea, just write the word workshop in the comments section. If you'd rather keep it on the down low, then you can connect and message me either on LinkedIn or on X. Now it's question time. Okay, well, I hope there was value in that. I have some time now to answer questions. There's just one question here as I speak from Tim. There is a fairly significant lag. So if you're here, as you're hearing this, if you have questions, pop them in the comment section real quick so that I can get to them. So Tim asks a question: in a small company, can people split their time between the growth group and the business as usual group? So Tim, I'm going to give you a short answer, and then I'm going to give you a longer, more nuanced answer. The short answer is no, they can't. And the reason I say that is the core problem that we're trying to address is the antagonistic nature of the two sets of activities. The reality is, if you have the one resource pool consisting of people who are responsible for both BAU activities and growth activities, the cold, hard reality is the effort that gets expended in pursuit of growth activities inevitably goes to zero. So it's the fact that people are trying to split their time between these two sets of activities that is actually the core problem. And of course, the way to solve it is to stop that, to split people into two groups. Now, a couple of things. I understand that in a small business, there's a limit to how quickly you can inflate operating expenses. Interestingly, in a small business, or if we wind back the clock to the beginning of a business, on day zero, you start with no revenue at all. And on day one, hopefully it's day one, you bank a customer's first check. And in that first day, you've experienced infinite growth. So obviously, at the genesis of an organization, the founder dedicates 100% of their activity to growth. And then as checks start to come in, the founder is conflicted, and obviously they give priority to business as usual. The danger is, as you start to scale the organization, you end up scaling not the initial activity, the one that caused you to go from 0 to 1, but you end up scaling the business as usual activities, and before long you have no growth activities at all. So how do we get around this? Well, one solution is to hustle like crazy if you're a very small business until you get to the size where you can add growth resources. Now, a critical point is to recognize why we're adding people. Are we adding people because we want them to contribute to the generation of operating profit, or are we adding people because we want them to contribute to the generation of growth? A critical point to ask this question is when you hire your first salesperson. Why are you adding a salesperson? Is it because you want growth, or is it because you want BAU? I would suggest that you should not add a salesperson at all until you find yourself in a situation where you're prepared to grow. And if that's why you're adding a salesperson, then you want to make sure that your salesperson is in the growth group and not the BAU group. And that means that you need to design their modus operandi and all of the workflows that they participate in such that there is no way that they can possibly get drawn into business as usual. So you want to make sure that they focus exclusively on hunting for new business and nothing else. They don't get drawn into detailed requirement discovery. They don't get drawn into solution design, proposal generation, and they definitely don't get drawn into onboarding new accounts or the management of existing accounts. Because if you allow your salesperson to have any involvement in those activities, what will happen before you know it is 100% of their time will be dedicated to BAU, and the effort expended on growth goes to zero. It's such a fragile formula. Now, what can you cheat? You can cheat a little bit. In the software industry, folks talk about time boxing. I think of time boxing as a poor man's division of labor. And the way time boxing works is you discipline yourself and or discipline the team to say, well, between 9 o'clock and lunchtime, or between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock every day, we focus on one specific activity. So you could say, well, we can't afford to have division of labor. So we're going to allocate 3 hours a day to focus exclusively on growth. And time boxing can work, but only if it's rigidly enforced. And I'm reticent to recommend it because one of the challenges you have in a small business is you tend not to have the same discipline that you might have in a larger organization simply because you can't afford it. So the short answer is no. The longer answer is you can, but you need to be extremely careful and extremely disciplined. Now, I did mention that in the presentation that sometimes you will need to have resources who contribute to both groups. Here's an example. If you have an engineering group and you have one or two subject matter experts, people with deep domain expertise, they may need to contribute to both new product development and custom engineering, for example. And custom engineering is a BAU function and new product development is a growth function. If you have individuals like that, you want to make sure that there are only one or two individuals in the organization that are contributing to both groups. You want to make sure that they have tons and tons of protective capacity. In other words, you need to design your organization so that they cannot become the bottleneck. And then you need to formally schedule their time. In other words, formally schedule their time to ensure that a sensible mix of the effort that there's a sensible mix of the effort expended on growth versus BAU. So you might say, well, I'm going to allocate slots in this person's calendar, and we're going to ensure that there's a 70-30 mix of slots, and we're going to audit this every week and make sure that that mix is maintained. So that's a long answer to a very short question, and we have some more questions here, which is awesome. So let me just work through them in the order that they appeared. Innovations required. Samir says innovations required for growth and to create a compelling proposition. We're a small business, so should we focus on innovating our products distribution? Yes. So yes, innovation isn't just required for growth. Innovation is the fountainhead for growth. In other words, if you take innovation away, growth eventually peters out. It goes to zero eventually. So it's not just a requirement, it's a prerequisite, I would say. The problem with innovation is everybody thinks they're innovative, just like everyone thinks they're a good driver. But the reality is most of us are not innovative because we fail to flex the innovation muscle, and we fail to develop what is probably a latent ability. By the same token, every one of us is a reasonable driver, but if you get on a go-kart track, you quickly discover that there's a hell of a difference between being an average driver and a good driver. And the key to becoming a good driver is to flex that driving muscle. So as part of creating a formal growth group, you ensure that there are a small number of people in the organization who focus their time exclusively on innovation. And really, it's that focus that's important. If you focus time on it and do it consistently, week after week, month after month, you end up getting good at it. And of course, you in most environments, your competitors aren't devoting the same level of effort to innovation. Santiago, hey there, Santiago. What typical results do you get when you deploy this new model? So one of the problems with it being a new model is we don't have a lot of results because traditionally we haven't taken the level of responsibility that we are proposing to take moving forward for the creation of the growth group in a formal sense. Now, we have for years been pushing our clients in this direction. In fact, the machine, which was published, I don't know, almost 10 years ago now, I prefaced the idea of replacing the chief revenue officer with a chief growth officer. I kind of prompted this idea back, or preempted this idea back then. And we have been working with our clients on the innovation piece. We have been working with them to to try and quarantine their sales resources, focus them exclusively on growth. And I guess the results that all of our clients have seen and are still seeing are a testament, in a sense, to this. But I guess what I'm saying is, let's take what we've been doing informally for the last 15 or 20 years and formalize it and approach it more aggressively. And I think it would be reasonable to expect that the results will improve. Now, the title of this presentation was, how do you sell when no one answers the phone? And what we have seen is a fairly dramatic decrease in the number of prospects who answer their telephones. Now, it's a very concerning thing, because if you're a salesperson, you can talk to existing customers easy enough. They'll answer your calls. You probably have their cell phone, and they'll recognize your name and they'll answer your call. But if you're attempting to hunt for new business, what a lot of our client salespeople are finding is that literally, virtually no one picks up the phone, which makes the pursuit of new business extremely difficult. So I think my advice is, broaden the aperture and recognize that the goal isn't sales in isolation. The goal is growth. I think that we've reached a point where it's necessary for organizations to go down this path. You have to. And if you don't believe me, get your sales team together, get them to dedicate half a day to calling strangers in organizations that you would like to do business, and sit in a damn room with them and listen to them calling and failing to talk to individual after individual after individual. And I think you're going to end up forming the same conclusion yourself. As I kind of inferred in the presentation, a lot of executives aren't really aware of the fact that it's virtually impossible for their salespeople to talk to potential customers, because their salespeople rarely try. And on the occasions that they do try, they probably don't feel that it's in their best interests to communicate their lack of success to the CEO. Martin, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, from Cardiff University asks, at what point in time do move the customer from growth to BAU group? Okay, after the first order or even before. I would say at the point at which the deal is signed. Now, sometimes, depending on the environment, the deal is signed, and then there's a whole bunch of pre-work that needs to occur before you receive the first order. So let's take industrial distribution as an example. Let's say you go and convince a new customer that you're going to become their supplier of fasteners, let's say. A contract gets signed, either formally or an agreement gets made informally. Before you can invoice the customer, there's oftentimes a huge amount of work that needs to be done. Auditing their current consumption, mapping the SKUs they currently purchase from competitors to the SKUs that in your ERP. Maybe setting up systems. If you're offering vendor managed inventory, it would be installing bin systems and setting up protocols. If there's EDI involved, there's having your tech team work with your tech team. So what you want to do in an environment like this, and I'm deliberately pointing to an extreme. If your environment's more simple, then you don't have to go to these extremes. But in an environment like that, the salesperson would win the deal. And then they would hand off to an onboarding group, and the onboarding group would be part of operations. Now, in a technology company, this wouldn't be called onboarding, it would be called customer success. But same concept. The onboarding group is responsible for onboarding the customer, which involves getting their first order, but the onboarding process is finished at the point at which the customer has adopted steady state behavior, whatever the desired steady state behavior is, at which point you can say, we've onboarded this customer, they're now a regular account. And at that point, onboarding disengages and moves on to work on the next account. So in complex environments, our clients will actually have salespeople pitch onboarding slots. They'll say, well, we don't have a slot available until late August. Would you like us to lock you into that slot? That's actually a closing technique that salespeople will use. And then there's a formal handoff to onboarding. Onboarding does, or customer success does the onboarding. And then once the customer has reached steady state, then there's a handoff from onboarding to customer service. And if it's a major account, there's a handoff from onboarding to customer service, and there's probably already been a relationship established with a strategic account manager who's also a part of the operations group. Okay, good question. Ricardo asks, in a cold call, is there an ideal balance between talking and asking questions? On one hand, many prospects expect to listen first to see if the conversation's worth their time. I agree, absolutely. So I've never liked the advice that sales trainers give that you sell by asking questions. The advice is half correct and half incorrect. If a prospect is interested in having a conversation with you, the Socratic approach works very well. It works very well to ask questions. You can say, Mr. Prospect, why are we even talking today? And they will say, well, I'm talking to you because I'm so frustrated with the experiences I'm having with our current supplier. And the salesperson can say, well, tell me more. What do you like? What don't you like? What would you most like to change? And the customer will describe exactly the solution that they want. So I'm all on board with the idea of selling by asking questions. However, that presupposes that the prospect is having a conversation with you. If they're not having a conversation with you, if they're holding the phone 6 inches away from their ear, trying to determine whether or not you're a friend or foe, then asking them questions is not a good strategy. What you need is an elevator pitch that grabs their attention. You need to say, I know you're busy, Mr. Prospect, but the reason I'm calling you is because we've been working with GE and we've cut their assembly time on their ABC product from 3 hours down to 35 minutes. In 8 minutes, I can show you how we've been able to do that. Do you have 8 minutes now, or should we schedule a time for later in the week? You need an elevator pitch. You need to be able to make a promise that sounds too good to be true, and then ask for a commitment of a small amount of time. Even in that case, with a conversation like that on the telephone, if you're lucky enough for the prospect to say, look, this sounds like a crazy proposition, but I have to give you 8 minutes to see if you can make good on that ridiculous claim you just made. Even those 8 minutes, you're not going to be asking questions for the 8 minutes. You're going to be doing a pitch to prove that the crazy promise you just made has some substance behind it. And if you can achieve that, then you can ask questions. There's a point in the sales conversation where the prospect flips from being the pursued to being the pursuer, and you need to wait as a salesperson until you recognize that the prospect is pursuing you for information before you start trying to sell by asking questions. Christoph Lambert, how are you? All the way from New Mexico, I think. Academia has lots of problems, Christoph, where the same people who chase research grants are expected to be budgeted and allocating effort on the research team doing the project execution. Yeah, same problem, hey. Add to that, bunch of effort is expended on things unrelated to growth or revenue. Any thoughts on translating your ideas to that domain? Christoph, I think you've already figured out how to translate them in the phrasing of the question. I mean, the obvious answer is to have a group that focus on chasing the research grants. I think if a business operator were to take over a university, the idea would be to have a dedicated team, a SWAT team, who focuses on going and chasing the research grants, and pull in the subject matter experts on a limited basis to participate in the pitch, rather than having the subject matter experts who are going to be doing the work expected to run the whole pitch. So yeah, if I was to consult to a university, I would say build a SWAT team that chases the money. And really, that's not a radical idea. That's what you would do if you were a normal business, right? If you're, Subway, you don't have the people who are responsible for making sandwiches go out there and try and sell franchises. You have a dedicated SWAT team called probably corporate development who are responsible for going and pitching to franchise operators. Rick asks, thanks for coming, Christoph. Rick Dunn asks, does a growth group have to be in the field or should they be in the office? There are very few reasons why you want to be in the field. And if you are going to be in the field, you want to make sure that you're doing something that absolutely cannot be done to the same level of quality in the office. Now, one thing that I think should be done by the growth group in the field is not commercial sales conversations. You don't need to be in the field to do that. If you look at how the defense contractors sell, for example, most of the conversations are video conferences, if not all of them. But one thing that absolutely should be done in the field that isn't done at all in most organizations is having whoever is responsible for new product development, in other words, go and actually spend blocks of time in your customers' businesses. A big criticism I have of a lot of our clients is they don't have a profound understanding of how their customers' businesses work. They think they do. They have a vague understanding. They've been able to infer a bunch from their interactions with existing and potential customers. But there's no one in the organization who has actually gone and sat in the customer's business and watched how it operated. In most cases, some organizations there are, and those organizations tend to be the innovative ones. But yeah, my view is if you want to innovate, don't do it from a distance. In fact, before you even start innovating, go and spend blocks of time, like days or weeks, sitting in, observing, taking notes, participating in meetings, and ask your customers if you can do it, and tell them that you're going to give them priority access to whatever insights you get. Come up with an irresistible proposition such that they're prepared for you to come and hang out in their business. In most cases, they'll be delighted for that to happen. And work on the shop floor with the operators. Sit in the office and listen to customer service reps on the telephone. Actually, work in their business and develop a profound understanding of how their business functions. Learn their language. Learn the metrics that they use, formally and informally. Learn all of their little protocols. And then come back to the office and start the innovation process. And that absolutely should be done in the field. Yeko asks, how do you determine who fits best in the new type of roles you've described? Well, I don't think it's as difficult as it sounds. My advice is visualize the role, or visualize the activities, the critical activities that are required of the person who fills that role. And then if you're sitting in a room with a bunch of other business leaders, ask the group, who do we all know who would be a perfect fit for this role given the set of activities? And it could be someone's son, could be someone's daughter, could be someone who works in the plant, could be someone who's a competitive salesperson, but ask, who do we know who'd be a perfect fit? And whenever I ask that question of a group of executives, there's consensus typically within 10 seconds. Oh, Jody from Acme, she would be incredible at this role. So once we've identified a person, it'd be great if you could go and recruit Jody, but if you can't go and recruit Jody, that's okay. You now need to go and find the person most similar to Jody that you can possibly find. That's the easiest way to do it. So you can ask, who in the organization do we have who's like Jody? Or if we have to run an ad, let's run an ad that describes Jody and asks readers of whatever job board we're posting on, is this person you? If so, please call us. We have a great role with a tremendous benefit package in mind for you. Santiago says, I'm going to run that experiment. Excellent. Tim Douglas says, thank you. That's awesome. I think we've covered all the questions here. We will send you a copy of the presentation. Tim's already written workshop in the comments here. If you're interested in workshopping this with your leadership team in a video conference, just type the word workshop into the comments here or just message me on LinkedIn. I've enjoyed preparing this event. I'm very excited about the potential of this. As I mentioned to Santiago, this isn't really a new direction for us so much as doubling down on something that we've been doing for the last 15 years or so, and I think it's super necessary for the types of organizations we work with, and I think there's a huge amount of upside for folks who are prepared to make this leap. Now, I am aware somebody posted on LinkedIn in response to a comment that I made, and it was a humorous post. Maybe they're in the audience now, but the host was something along the post was something along the lines of, Justin, whenever you come up with an idea, it requires massive organizational change, and that's true. Definitely, we're talking about a major organizational restructure here. I don't think I don't think there's a requirement for an inflation in operating expenses, but there is a requirement to redesign the organization and probably upset a few middle managers by rewriting responsibilities. But I also think that many, if not most of the organizations we work with don't have a choice. This is something that you're going to have to do sooner or later. But better to do it sooner, better to do it now while you can, rather than have the market force it on you when you're less prepared. So I think these are exciting times. Thank you so much for participating in this, and good luck with execution. Hit me up if you think I can help. All the best.